Hello, my name is Nigel Bowden. I'm the author of the book MikroTik Scripting. I'd like to welcome you to lesson number 6 in our series on how you can get into the world of MikroTik scripting. Just want to remind you, you can get the book from Amazon in both ebook and paperback format, and it covers everything we've covered in this particular series, plus an awful lot more. There's a lot more to cover in terms of commands and the general theory of scripting. We've only really scratched the surface in this series, but hopefully it's given you a good starting point and maybe whet your appetite to grab hold of a copy of the book. Okay, so let's get into the Telegram reporter. So in this particular lesson, we're going to have a quick look at the entire end-to-end solution again, just to make sure we understand where the reporter script fits in relation to the previous scripts that we've created. We'll have a look at what we expect this script to do. We'll have a look at the requirements for it. We'll also have a look at how we create the code, and we'll do quite a bit of testing to make sure it works as expected. Obviously it needs to interact with the other scripts we've built, so there's quite a bit of testing to do, and I'll have to say this is going to be quite a large topic, this one. It may even be a 3-part video. There's a lot of ground to cover, quite a few new concepts, but I think if you've followed along with the previous episodes, you should be able to follow this and finalize building the project and get your own Telegram reporting solution going. So just to recap where we have been and where we're going in this particular episode. So in previous episodes, we've created these 3 probe scripts. We've got an interface utilization script. We've got a temperature checking script to check the internal temperature of the MikroTik, and we've got a web monitor script which allows us to monitor a number of websites to make sure they're available to the MikroTik. If there are any thresholds breached or issues detected by any of those scripts, they push them into a global variable called Telegram queue, and that global variable will be periodically processed by the script we're building today, which is the Telegram reporter script. All of the scripts run from the MikroTik scheduler. And if anything is detected by the Telegram reporter, it will interact with the API of the Telegram cloud service, which will cause an alert to be initiated to the Telegram app. And the way we actually send these alerts is to a special kind of user on the Telegram service called a bot. You can think of a bot as another type of user. If you've got a user account on there, you know that you can talk to other users and send chat messages, etc. But a bot is a special type of user that you can create yourself, that only you can interact with. And by using the API provided by Telegram, you can send data into to that bot so that we can display it in the Telegram app. So hopefully it will become clearer as we step through the process of creating the bot, creating the script, and see how it all hangs together. Okay, so one more time, the development workflow that we're going to be following is exactly the same. We're going to use a development machine to create the script, and we're going to be running the VSC application as we have for all of our examples for editing our code. We're going to move the script onto the MikroTik device. We're going to deploy it to the MikroTik. We're going to then do lots of testing for this particular script to make sure it works as expected. And if we do hit any issues, we can do a little bit of debugging, and any fixes we apply then pushed back out to the MikroTik again. It's an iterative process that we repeat until we get the code that we need. Okay, so what is this script going to do? Basically, there are quite a few sort of additional concepts that we need to consider when we're talking about the Telegram app and the bot. I've already explained basically what a bot is. It's a special type of user that we can send data to, and then when we're using the Telegram app, we can actually see the data from that bot via a sort of chat session we have with it. So in our case, we'll actually be sending in alert messages. So if we're running the Telegram app, one of the users on our list of users will be the bot, and we will see a notification when there's been a problem, because we'll have sent in a message from the MikroTik using the Telegram API into the bot that we've created. To actually speak to the bot via the API, we actually need two things. We actually need an API token, which is a kind of password, if you like. We don't want everybody in the world to be able to just send messages into our bot. We need to protect it, so the security mechanism is an API token, which is like a very long string of characters. And in addition to that, we need a thing called a chat ID, which allows us to chat with the bot once we've got the API token. So one of the things we have to do initially is check that we've got the chat ID that we need, and if we haven't, there's a mechanism for retrieving that, and we'll cover that when we're creating the script. So once we've checked we've got the chat ID we need, the next thing that we do is we look in this Telegram queue array that we've been creating and adding information to in all of the other scripts. So if there are any alerts in that array, then we will send them via the API to the Telegram service, which should cause a message to pop up in our app. There are a couple of prerequisites to this script. Because we're interacting with the Telegram service, we need to make sure it's set up to receive messages from our script that's running on our MikroTik. And so we need to create a bot on the Telegram service, and these are free to create. They're very easy, and we'll go through the process. I'll go through it step by step. So as long as you've got a user account already on Telegram, you can create yourself a bot to work with this particular application and receive the messages that are sent. We also need the API token I was just speaking about, which is like this huge long string of characters, which is equivalent to sort of an unguessable password, I guess. If you've not used sort of APIs and tokens before, it may not, maybe sort of new terminology, but you can think of it as a very long password that nobody could possibly ever guess. So once you're given that is your way of interacting with your bot, and only you will be able to interact with it because you have that token. So in this case, the data source for the script, as I said, is going to be the Telegram queue array, which we've created via all of the other probe scripts which are running, and we'll be populating it with alerts. And to run the script, we'll just use this import Telegram reporter .rsc command. It's very similar to how we've run the scripts, all the previous scripts that we've created. So hopefully it's not too confusing. There's a few sort of new terms and things there, but hopefully it will all become clear when we move through the coding and testing stage. You'll get a good idea of where we get the various bits of information and what's talking to what. I think the key thing is to think back to this solution overview. Just think about the fact that this Telegram reporter is processing anything that gets put into the Telegram queue. If it finds anything, it will use the API calls using the API key that we've been given to talk to the cloud service. In the Telegram cloud service, you will have created a bot, so it will hit the bot, and the bot will then send a message to your Telegram app. Okay, so I think, there is one more piece of information before we start coding. If you are interested in knowing more about the API which is used, and if you're not familiar with APIs, I think the easiest way to think about this is very much like when you browse to a website with a browser. You have a URL that you need to hit, and you will get a web page which is sent back to you. With APIs, it's a similar sort of thing. You don't use a browser. We'll have a piece of code, but it effectively browses to a web address, and that web address, instead of returning a web page, it will send you some data. So in our case, we'll actually be getting data about the session that we've got for the bot with the Telegram cloud service. So we're not going to delve too deeply into that. I've already worked out what the web addresses are that we need to hit, and how to construct the URL. But if you did want to actually look into this in any more detail, there is a document here which you can use to get more into the guts of the API. one other concept to just briefly cover at the bottom here. You can see that there's, if you're not familiar with JSON, this probably doesn't mean too much, but this at the bottom here we've got is a JSON data structure. So when we actually make our calls into the bot, the Telegram service will, as part of its response, will return this data. And as part of the data, there's this thing which I mentioned previously, which is called the chat ID. And as well as needing the API token that I spoke about, we also need to know what this chat ID is. And you see this number here that begins 138. We actually need to have that number, and we need to send that with every request that we send to the Telegram service. So every time we need to talk to it, we need to send the API key and the chat ID, and as long as we've got those and they're the correct values, we can just send as many messages in to our bot as we like. And I've just put this here because you may want to refer back to it when you've seen some of the code and wonder how we actually extract the chat ID. And we get as I say, we get the chat ID every time we send a message into the bot via API calls, but the very first time we speak to it, we don't actually know the chat ID as yet. We've got a bit of a programming technique to extract this string and pull out the chat ID that we need for all of our subsequent calls into the bot. Anyway, you'll see this in the coding, but when we're talking about the chat ID, just remember that we've done a call into the API, and we get passed back this whole array of data, and we need to pull out this chat ID. So coding. Before I jump into this, there are quite a few new topics that we probably need to cover so that the code that we looked at is going to make sense to you. So I'm going to spend a little bit of time going through some of that. I think there's about 4 or 5 new topics, and so we'll jump right into those. And to demonstrate these, I'll do them on the from a terminal window, as we normally do. I'll make this one a little bit bigger because we've got quite a few bits and pieces to cover off here. Okay, so the first concept that I need to cover with you, we're going to be using a new command called find. Okay, and the find command is used to find the position of a character or a number of characters within another string. Okay, and you'll see why we need this later when we're sort of deriving some values from some of the calls that we make, but I just thought I'd cover it in some detail. And the way that we actually use this, I will put an example on screen so you can see it working and paste that in. So what we have here, we have the find command here. The arguments that it takes the argument of a string. In this case, I've just put the string router, and it takes a second argument here, which in this case is the letter U. And what this is trying to do is it's trying to find where in the string router does the letter U exist. And if I actually hit return, we're expecting a numeric value to come back so we know whereabouts that is. I hit return, and you see it's actually returned the value number 2. So what it's saying is the value, the letter U is at position 2 in the string router. Okay, this may be a bit confusing because if we count it, it counts 1, 2, 3. The letter U is actually in the third position. As with the array values that we've seen previously, the indexing begins with letter 0. So it's actually letter R is index 0, O is index 2 at 1, and U is index 2. So this is actually correct. It's index number 2 or position 2 within the string router. Okay, the next command that we want to look at is the pick command, and this command, I'll just put up another example for us here. So we can see here we've got the pick command, and what this will do, we actually use this to extract one or more characters from a string. So the string in this case is the string router, and what we want to do is we actually want to extract the letters from positions 1 to 4. So if I hit return here, we can see we've actually extracted the letters OUT, which are in positions 1. Remember the 0 indexing, so we start 0, O is letter 1, U is letter 2, T is letter 3, and although we've specified index number 4, the way that this command works is that you always specify the end of the string as being the index after the end of the string you want to hit. That may not be completely clear, but yeah, the last digit here, the last number, always has to be one index after the string that you want to hit. So in this case, we actually wanted to extract OUT, so we have to specify the index number of E, because that's the character after the string we want to extract. Okay, so that's the pick command. And so I'm just going to show a couple more sort of real world examples of that. So what we'll do now is we'll create a global variable for us to do some extraction on. And just to make this a little bit more interesting, let's I was going to use the same string again, but let's change it to something a little bit more interesting here. Switch. Okay, so we're using this string switch, and so the next thing we're going to do is we will actually, you can see, so basically just to recap, we've assigned the string switch to the variable device, and if I paste in this this particular find command here, what we're trying to do is find out where the letter U exists within the variable device. And I just wanted to include this example because it just shows that it doesn't have to be an explicit string as the first parameter. In this case, it can actually be a variable that we put in there. So in this case, I'm probably going to get a 0 value. Yeah, I've got nothing out of that because it doesn't actually exist in there. So let's change it to something that would exist. So we'll go with the letter H. Okay, and we can see that exists at index position 5. So if we count that, so that's 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, exactly as we expect. And we'll do the same again for the pick command, and this time we will again use the same variable, and we'll pick out letters. Let's change it up a bit. Let's go for 0 to 5 and see what happens there. Okay, so you can see in this particular instance we've actually used the device string again, and we've extracted 0 through to the fourth index. As I said, just remember, with pick you need to specify the index number after the end of the string you want to extract. So in this case we can see we've got 0, index 0 is S, and then we've got W is 1, I is 2, T is 3, C is 4, and so we get the word switch with a H chopped off the end of it there. Okay, so that's find and pick. There's another new command we want to have a look at as well called len, which is going to give us the length of a particular string. Okay, I'm just having a few copy and paste issues again. If I paste it in, so this is the command here, len, which is short for length. So if we want to know the length of a string, then we just use this length command here. So if I hit return, we would expect that to be 5 because it's 5 characters long, and we could always, if I change that to apples, you can see it reports it as 6. So we'll be using the length command as well. There's one more topic I want to cover, which is a bit challenging maybe if you haven't seen it before. We actually do use what's called a regular expression within the script that we're going to create, and a regular expression is just a way of checking to see whether a particular substring exists within a string. Okay, it's probably best to show you via some examples, but think about regular expressions. They have some very sophisticated syntax that you can apply. You can get into some really sort of deep complex concepts with regular expressions. We're just going to use them in a very simplistic way, but I just wanted to introduce them, and if ever there's a good reason for buying the book, if you want to know more about regular expressions, it's covered in detail in the book, and there are very few sort of other resources I've come across that that cover it for the MikroTik platform. So let me just give you an example, and I'll explain what we're doing here. So I will just copy and paste this here. So here is the example. So what we're actually doing here, let me explain. We've got a string here, which is the string router. And what we want to know is, does the letter R exist within the string router? I mean, we obviously know that it does. We can see it's fairly self-evident. But you can imagine that this string router could be a variable that's been derived in some other way, and we want to check whether or not R exists within it. And so if you look at the syntax of it, the way that we actually use regular expressions is we specify a string, then we have this little tilde character, and then we have the letter, or this can actually be a string, a substring that we want to check for. So the way of reading this is to say, is this letter R within this string router? Okay, and the output, or the result of a regular expression, is always true or false. Does R exist within router? Then that should be true. So what we'll do now, I'll just hit return, and we can see it's responded saying that it's true, which is good. So what we can also do, say if we now change that to X, and we know the value X doesn't exist within the string router, that returns false, which is what we expect. We can actually get a little bit more sophisticated with this. It doesn't have to just be a single character that we're checking for. We can actually, if I paste this in, this time we're going to check for the substring ER. Does that exist within router? Which we would expect to be true, which it is. But if we checked for OR, which doesn't exist, those two characters together as a substring do not exist within the string router, so that gives us false. So that's relatively sort of straightforward, but as I say, there is additional syntax that you can use within regular expressions, and things get a little bit more interesting. So I'll just show you a example which is similar to what we use in the script, and I'll just explain this one before we start. So if we imagine that this string here, which is the one we want to check to see if it contains a substring, that in our case that could be a chat ID. This is what we're actually doing in the script, is we're checking the format of a chat ID string, and we need to check whether all of the contents of the string are numeric characters only. Okay, so if there was a letter in there, for instance, or an apostrophe, or some other letter that wasn't a number, we know we've got a problem, because that wouldn't fit the format that we need. So what we've got here, instead of just having a straight substring as we've had in previous examples on the lines above, we've got this syntax. We've got these square brackets, and we've got this little I think it's called a hat symbol here at the start, and then we've got the numbers 1 through to 0. And what this actually means is the square brackets mean if any of these numbers match. So it could be any one of these. If any of one of these match in the string we're checking, then that would be true. But what this little hat symbol at the start means is, this means if we match anything that is not one of these characters. So if there was a character in this string here, which could be a chat ID, which wasn't 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 0, then we would have some sort of formatting error, and we need to take some action. We can't use that chat ID because it's the wrong format. Okay, so if I hit return on that, it comes out as false, and you need to sort of think around this one a little bit. So what we're saying is, are any of these not or is anything that isn't one of these within this string? And the response to that is false. It's sort of like a reverse logic. If I changed it to just to sort of show you the difference, if I say if any of these strings are within here, report true, and then if I change it back, put the hat symbol back in, if any of these characters in here are not this, then you report true. Let me just put it back in. It actually reports a false condition because they all match. It's a difficult concept, but anyway, we use this check to make sure we've got the correct format. But so if I basically check and put a character A in here, then we actually get a true condition. So if we get this true condition in our script when we're checking our chat ID, there's a character in there that we wouldn't expect to be in a chat ID, it will report a true condition, and we know that we've got a problem with our chat ID. Right, this is all very very dry. If this doesn't completely make sense, then I think it's one of these topics you just have to sort of take on face value for now, maybe revisit it at a later time to get into the real detail of it. But for now, from a high level, we can just accept that this test will check the format of our chat ID. So let's get into some coding. So we're into the coding demo section, and I will start by going back to VSC. And as usual, we need to start by creating our script file. So this one's going to be called Telegram Reporter. Now, there we go, .rsc. Okay, and as usual, I will paste in code blocks section by section and explain what's going on. So let me just get my copy and paste ready on the other screen. So here we go. We'll start off with some fairly familiar code. It ties up very much with what we've seen in the previous examples. Got a few more extra variables here, but we'll sort of come to how we derive those in a few moments. So the way that this actually works is we do our usual message to talk about what this script does. We've got a number of variables here. Some of these are quite familiar. Obviously, we've got the Telegram queue here. We've got our debugging. We've also got our debugging function. But you notice there's a couple more additional variables that have crept in. We've got this token variable, which is the API token that we need to get when we create our bot, and we haven't actually got to that piece yet. This is just a token from another bot that I've done some testing with. We've got the chat ID, which we need to establish before we can send any messages, and we've also got this chatbot URL, which is the URL we need to hit when we're sending data to the API for Telegram. And the API document I referred to a little bit earlier sort of gives you a little bit more information around this. For now, we'll just have to sort of accept that this is what we need to use. Okay, and basically we're going for this api.telegram.org, and we're using the token that we've been given to talk to the bot, and we just have to prefix it with this bot string here. So it's relatively straightforward. Okay, so we've got our tokens to get things kicked off. And the next, I've just noticed actually this is running pretty long now. So I think what I'm going to do at this stage is actually take a pause. We'll do a part 2 video when we actually get into the main guts of the script, and then we'll get into creating our bot and testing it. So yeah, we've covered a lot of ground in this one, a lot of new concepts. I hope it's all hanging together fairly well for you. And in the next video, we'll complete the coding of the bot, and hopefully we'll get all that testing done so you can see how it all hangs together, and we should have a fully working bot by the end of the second video. It may run into a third one. There's quite a bit to cover. We'll see how things go. Anyway, thanks for joining me, and look forward to speaking with you again soon.